discussions. I'm hearing that they were indeed good discussions. What we're going to do is we're going to go a little bit over. It's a workshop, and AgMIP workshops are really workshops. So it's not that we have to keep to a specific time. But so what we're going to do is ask the rapporteurs to do a 3 to 5 minute breakout report, and then we're going to turn to Walter for wrap up, and then I'll give just a heads up for the AgMIP program tomorrow. But first, I want to now turn to Allison Rose, who is our moderator for our breakout group report backs. Allison is at the IRI, and she makes the CCAP's program, especially the flagship on climate information services and climate informed safety nets work all around the world. So Allison, over to you. Thank you.
Hi, great, thanks. I hope everyone enjoyed their breakout discussions. I know I enjoyed the group that I joined. So as Cynthia mentioned, we're just going to go a little bit over since we are at the end of the session for today. So we're asking each rapporteur to speak for 3 to 5 minutes. We're not going to take questions from the broader group because we hope you've had opportunity to discuss things in your group and ask questions earlier. But if you do have a question, why don't you just put that in the chat box, and we'll make sure the person it's directed to receives that question. So we're gonna start with the group on agriculture, water, and land. Sarah, are you gonna, do this group?
Let me see if I can share my screen.
So 3 to 5 minutes, and I'll try not to be mean, but I will let you know when we reach 5 minutes just to keep things moving.
Yeah, can everyone see that?
Yeah.
Great, so we had quite a dynamic discussion. And I think overall, we felt that always more science can be done, but that the main barriers to action right now were not lack of scientific knowledge, but more in the policy space. So the first thing that we discussed was the lack of incentives for farmers to get educated and implement new methods, because it's about their livelihoods as well. And making it economically viable for the farmer is essential. Another problem that was identified was a lack of interest in local regions to take actions that may have a global effect for someone in a totally different region. And the word wasn't used, but how to make people less selfish about what they can change in their own systems to help other people somewhere else. Non-transparent supply chains was another barrier that was mentioned, with final consumers not feeling connected to the producers and many times not aware of challenges that they may be facing, and that will come back in later things we discussed as well. Poor access to education and lack of local experts in developing countries was mentioned, and also in many developing countries, access to land was mentioned. Regarding splitting up of land as generations continue, there's less and less land per person, but also land grabs, for example, in Africa, with potentially non-food producers from other regions buying large bits of land, and food production goes down. So those were the barriers we identified. Areas for interdisciplinary research. This followed the idea of local actions, but taking these global concepts and global data and global science and applying it to local contexts is essential to actually making transformations happen. Breaking down silos was another big topic. Co-production of knowledge, and also involving the human component, again, with people's livelihoods all the way down the chain. And that's going to take, scientists working with anthropologists, working with economists. Research to identify examples of programs that worked and didn't work, and actually learning from that and not reinventing the wheel and doing something that doesn't work again. And there were lots of amazing examples discussed in the breakout group. Studying indigenous strategies and involving indigenous people. Don't just take ideas from elsewhere and impose it on a different region, and learning from the people that have been working that land forever to know what may work or not. And there was mention of how we basically have two different levels we're working on here to improve underperforming systems and also rethinking destructive high-performing systems, and that both are going to be essential to making practices better in the food system. And it was also mentioned that potentially improving underperforming systems would potentially even be easier than rethinking the complicated and destructive currently high-performing systems. And I already mentioned the need for co-production of knowledge. And the last thing were actions. So the first action was basically to develop a roadmap of where we hope to go, because you can't implement anything if you don't have a target for where you want to head in the future. Again, localizing incentives so that global transformations can take place. And it was mentioned to really do case studies, take these big data and doing case studies in various regions. Education and public awareness, both for the overall public and for policymakers and leaders. Social movements can be very powerful in sparking change, and decision makers need to see value, sometimes even economic value, in order to commit resources and mobilize. And we also discussed the idea of environmental value added in terms of food pricing. And we see more and more people are interested in environmental impacts. And also the trend is that more and more of the world will be middle class in the future. And so the idea of promoting the value of environmental impact in the cost of the food could be a way to move practices forward. And that's what we talked about.
Great, thank you so much. And that was exactly 5 minutes.
Oh, great.
So many interesting things there. I think a lot of co-production and the need to also study what hasn't worked in addition to what's worked. So it sounds like you had a really interesting conversation. So our next group is shock, stresses, and building resilience. Kai, are you going to report back?
I will report back. I have to add that we were a bit over time, so I didn't have the time to make a nice presentation. Essentially slipped right into the session before it started, but I will try to summarize nevertheless. Maybe I'll try to share the screen to have the questions here for everybody. So yeah, our session on shocks, stresses, and building resilience was focused on those three main questions. And the first one that dealt with the main barriers can possibly summarized by, yeah, first of all, the question of data availability and access, which is necessary to understand the systems better that we deal with, because in that specific topic, we have to link yeah, the climate sphere with the ag response, and then finally the human factor, which is very hard to predict. We talked a lot about that part of the story. So the third column essentially how to deal with specific policy decisions, export restrictions, and so on. And there were a few solutions that were provided, such as yeah, trying to make it a bit more unlikely that such measures are being set in place by trade regulations, or by enhancing storages, or by very local initiatives that allow communities to have specific storages in place in order to smooth specific crop failures. Then another barrier, of course, that we identified and that links to the second aspect as well is interdisciplinarity. Involves many different people with different backgrounds that have their own language, of course, and that's a common problem when working on a topic like that. Not everybody might have the same language, or like terms like shocks might not refer to the same thing in every subgroup. So one challenge, of course, is to get economists, policy experts, climate experts, and nutrition experts on a table and agree on a common language and get them to work. And yeah, the climate school could essentially be a place where that happens, where people listen and discuss and try to get a feeling for what is essential in the respective other discipline. So on the question of what action should comprise the first steps, I didn't collect that many points, so maybe Wolfram or Alex, you can jump in here in case you caught something. I guess I mentioned a few initial steps like the climate school or working on better data availability already. Of course, better systems understanding is always something that should happen, but Wolfram and Alex.
I'll just say thanks to Kai, and I'm still a little bit pondering a comment late in the session about shocks in both sides of the distribution. So the high yielding, high production shocks, or a drop in prices, not just a spike in prices, and that's probably different dynamics, but would be an interesting area to explore. Thanks.
So is that every from your group? Was there no other comments? Okay. Well, thank you. Oops, sorry. That sounded really interesting. I think a lot of the discussion on the interdisciplinary issues obviously has a lot of relevance for this workshop and the climate school, as you mentioned. So our next group is nutrition and health equity. And I'm not sure, Corey or Catherine, which one of you will report back?
I will start, and then Corey will take.
Great, more. Thank you so much.
Corey, can you please share your screen? You have to summarize. Then I share my screen. Oh, no, okay, thanks. All right, so it was a very interesting discussion, and we had about 14 participants in the nutrition and health equity. So we started off with 3 case studies where it's important to look at nutrition and health. The first one was on how increasing CO2 levels will change the protein levels in rice, and that will affect mainly countries where people are already very vulnerable, and that will be the future trend. And we would think of, is that a fair outcome? Then in the second case, we discussed in the second case study, we talked about dependence on the daily income and what kind of food supply and what is the diet, the impact of the diet. And in the third one, it was a local one looking at the effect of the double burden in the food desert in the upper town in Manhattan. And then we started a discussion on what are the barriers and the actions for nutrition and health equity. And we had a long discussion, and actually the first point, and it came out that we need to consider multiple parameters and to overcome structural inequities. And that very often we see there is a factor of lobbying, and that will influence the policy structures. We gave a few, I was given an example on corn subsidies in the US, but there are also, we know that, for example, there are hybrids of rice varieties, for example, there are very often influenced in the third world countries. And then we should move to, that's where we should move to a more food, the industry should move forward to being more transparent on where the food is coming from, where are the sources and the resources. And very often the multinational companies are patent on crop species, which government should rethink if that is the way to go, because that will be a disadvantage, especially for developing countries. And now I would say that Corey, you take over the second 2 points.
Sure, I'll take over. So for our needs for research and practice, we started out by saying that, admitting that linking science to behavior or change is hard, but it can be done. So one example that came up was this idea of the carbon footprint in supermarkets. So in New York City, you can see the calorie per meal when you're ordering meals in a restaurant, and this is to try to influence, kind of bringing scientific data onto a menu to influence decisions. You could do that with the carbon content of food in supermarkets as a way to get science linked to behavior. We realized that local is always an easier place to link research and community, but that we need to scale local eventually, which is a theme we've heard repeatedly. And very good perspectives from the social sciences on coordinating the perspectives of kind of psychology and sociology, so behavior, habits, and norms, with kind of the fields of economics and public policy, where how do we, not how do people make decisions, but how do we create the right environments or the right kind of price signals for those decisions. So we need to coordinate those two perspectives, which kind of leads well into next steps, or the first steps we'd take, which we, as other groups have said, we need to come up with unified core measures to bring together disciplines. So not to get them at the same table only, but to get them using comparable data. And finally, that we can refocus some energy from the green or climate movements onto health and food to make it more immediate and to make it more personal for change, because ultimately people are a bit selfish. So great discussion. Thanks.
Great, thank you so much. Sounded really interesting. Also some interesting points on the interdisciplinary work. So our next and final group is the enablers of transformation. And Nico, I think you are going to report back for that group.
Yes, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yeah.
Great, awesome. So thank you, Pam and Malgosia, for facilitating this breakout group about enablers of transformation. We have 12 participants in our group. And I found very interesting the way as they facilitate the conversation. They basically ask us to contribute to this matrix of transformation, identifying from the supply side and the demand side and the consumption side, what transformations are needed. And from the supply side, we identified priority areas, at least in this discussion, related with environmental sustainability and greater biodiversity, but also in the shape of the market and the supply side. And it refers going from linear to circular, and defining and redefining the networks of the supply chains. From the consumer side, we put a lot of attention to behavioral change while incorporating diversity, and specific topics like reducing waste, food and packing. And of course, there are some topics.
I don't want to interrupt. Can you just make it bigger?
Okay, great, sorry.
Yeah.
Give me 1 second. Well, actually, I think
If you go to the
Bottom right.
bottom right. Yeah. Bottom right corner, there's the.
You can see better, or
Yeah, I think that's better.
okay. And from there are other areas, of course, that connect both sides, the supply and the demand. And we found something interesting about redefining the research priorities and facilitating connections between these two sides. So going back to the key questions and based on these definition of priorities and concerns from the supply and the demand side, we start to discuss especially the environmental and sustainability barriers. We identified that in some communities, people want to do good things, but they don't know how to do it. Even people who can afford sometimes things are not taking good decisions. There is a lot of space for contra marketing. But this information also expand to not only facilitate that transparency with consumers, so supply can inform better the consumers, but also improve information, financial information, access to credit, and information fits in different ways. So basically, yeah, it's around how to facilitate that flow of information, and also clarify the benefits and costs of ecosystem services provided by sustainable agriculture. That's an important factor. So what interdisciplinary research is needed? Well, if you want to make an effective connection of these both sides of the same coin, it's important to understand community level interventions. However, in our group, we also discuss how to scale up those communities intervention, how to actually make a difference in food systems. And this information actually need the mix of public and private data and how to connect to policy. That's an important perspective from interdisciplinary research. It's not only about academic research, but how to actually better connect with public and with policy. And also have the financial technology to pay for that kind of attributes, and also involve and get on board a large agribusiness if this is something that is desirable at some point. As actions and first step, we were discussing about the infrastructure to advance that policy that can involve the use of, for instance, digital tools to facilitate this flow of information, and actually potentially scale policies. As we mentioned, we need to disseminate these kind of priorities at different levels, policy, smallholders, changing attitudes, so we can actually improve trust on information, on-time delivery, and basically trust the information that you get as a consumer, or the information that you are communicating as a supplier. And we also mentioned the importance of advanced financial services as part of this big notion of information.
Great, thank you so much. Some important points on the scale up. So I think that's everyone. There's just a comment from Eric to the rapporteurs. If you could send him your notes, and he put the email address in the chat box. So thank you to all the rapporteurs for those great summaries. I know it can be difficult to summarize a discussion into such a short period of time. So now we're going to go to Walter Batkin, who's going to wrap up the session.
Yes, great. Thank you, Allison, for moderating, and thank you to the rapporteurs and the discussion leaders. It sounds like they really were great discussions. I just have to take the opportunity to introduce Walter because first, Director of the Regional and Sectoral Research Program, leader of Latin American Caribbean at the IRI at the Earth Institute, principal of the great Act Now program, that he's providing great leadership of. But the third thing is that he and I did our very first project on climate change and agriculture together many years ago. So a while ago. So it's great. Walter's going to do the wrap up for the session. So over to you, Walter. Just at the end, I'll just show the program for tomorrow morning. But over to you, Walter.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Thank you very much for organizing this amazing event. It's been really good. You know, there are a few concepts that I believe I'm taking from this great event. One on food system. One is interconnectedness. Everybody talked about the many important dimensions that are present in food systems. Now, what is our hope? Our hope as scientists, as researchers. Our hope is that our science informs policies that will promote sustainable and healthy food systems. And what is the challenge? The challenge is that we belong to communities that work very differently. The typical policymakers, you know, they have holistic views, they live in a completely integrated world, they never think in one dimension. And what is happening to us in the scientific community? We're getting better and better in smaller and smaller issues. So a long time ago, with a friend of mine, we wrote a paper and we're saying that is creating islands of knowledge in an ocean of ignorance. And policymakers navigate that sea of ignorance. So the big challenge that I think we have in front of us is to connect those islands. And how do we connect those islands? How do we get this integrated view? One way is what Mario Herrero said earlier, the next generation of models. That's great. It's great hope in that. But that's for the next few years. What do we do today? Today, we need a change in the culture. We need to learn to create and work in multidisciplinary teams. And very importantly, and especially in a setting like we work in universities, we need to promote the formation of integrators. Scientists, specialists with expertise in different issues are critical to advancing knowledge. But as critical as those are the people that can take that knowledge, integrate it, and translate it into a language that becomes understandable and actionable in the policy community. So that's one, interconnectedness. The second one is scale. I think what we learned today, we knew that, all are important. Global studies are critical to inform institutions that affect policy worldwide, like FAO, WFP, World Trade Organization. But then it's at the local level, like Jen's example was great. It's at the local level that we can see the impacts of our work. And the third concept is climate change. We really need to make a big effort to bring climate change as a challenge in the policy community as a problem of the present, as opposed to as a problem of the future. We heard throughout the session how extreme events are so critical for food systems and how a changing climate is making those extreme events more frequent and more damaging. Now, those are the same types of events that we are confronting today. So what are we learning? A great way to improve the adaptive capacities of societies, of food systems to future climate is to start to improve adaptation to current climate. And that requires acting today. And that is much more attractive and actionable for a policymaker. How do we inform the policies that are needed now to promote good practices for sustainable and healthy food systems that are further challenged by a changing climate? So those are my three key messages that I take from this wonderful event. It truly has been inspiring. I think it's a great example of people working in different areas and coming together to develop a common vision and hopefully a common plan of action. And I feel very optimistic about the future. And I think we have a great opportunity to work together. So thank you, Cynthia, and all the organizers. And now back to you.
Thank you so much, Walter. I agree. I think it's been a wonderful session, really bringing the flavor and the potential of the Columbia Climate School food system theme area to fruition. I think all the different richness of the different presentations, the discussion, the panels, having early career scientists with us and participating as well. Just all I think we did fulfill what we were hoping to do with this session. So thank you very, very much to everyone involved. Just right at the end, just want to share my screen one last time to invite you to the program for tomorrow for AgMIP8, and which it follows right on from the session in the morning, follows right on from the discussions that we've had in this session on it's from assessment to action. And here we have a great lineup of stakeholders from many different groups. The keynote is being given by Sally Rocky from the Foundation for Food and Agriculture Research. Bill Hohenstein from USDA is leading a panel that includes Youssef Nassef from the UNFCCC on the global climate change side, Ernie Shea from Climate Smart Agriculture, Heifer Project is there, Carlos Castaneda, or Oscar Castaneda from Heifers. So we're going to be getting many different views from, as Walter was just saying, who the policymakers from the ocean, right, as they're in their boats on the ocean of policy and action. And then there's the session, then the modelers then respond. Then we have a panel of modelers responding to the stakeholders. That's in the morning, and then in the afternoon, we're hearing from AgMIP regions. There's wonderful work being done in basically all the main agricultural regions of the world through AgMIP, and those representatives from each one of those regions are going to be sharing the work in the regions around the world. So with that, thank you again to all who participated and who presented and guided the research discussions in this session, and look forward to seeing you, I hope, tomorrow, and also through AgMIP, but also through the Columbia School and the food network there. Thanks a lot. And we're now closing the session. Thank you very much.